Okay, thank you, Lee. And next up is public input. We did have two people sign up ahead of time that did want to speak. First was Leanne Bain from the Charleston Tour Association. I'm gonna see if I can give her the ability to talk. There we go. Leanne, are you there?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Leanne Bain, and I am president of the Charleston Tour Association. And I would like to briefly comment on the three proposed proposals on carriages ordinance that are on your agenda today. The first one is the Charleston Carriage Horse Advocates. I think it's ridiculous. In my opinion, these suggestions are not there to help the horses or the safety of the industry, but as a vendetta with the goal of running the carriage companies out of business. The second one by the city kind of concerns me too. In this, I feel that the city is not the business and they are acting like the business in several of these proposals. For example, in one of them, they are definitely stepping over the line. An emergency plan was called for. I mean, does the city require a hotel, a restaurant, or even a cab company to provide them with an emergency plan? In fact, I am really wondering why the city would want the liability associated with their suggestions. I do not work for a carriage company or drive carriages, but when I became the president of the Charleston Tour Association, I visited the barns and farms to learn about their businesses. I have 3 rescue dogs and make my own dog food. You can tell I'm an animal lover. And I would not support these businesses in any way if I thought the horses were being abused. The carriage companies love their animals. They care about their city and the guests that visit it. Their proposal is an olive branch showing that they are willing to work together to create solutions that are fair and equitable to all. In fact, in my opinion, all 3 proposals should be thrown out. They are not necessary. We have regulations already in place. But you, as members of the Tourism Commission, if you feel that there are issues to be worked on, please then start from scratch. Please do not choose a proposal by groups whose goal is to close down the carriage companies or options by the city. Remember, the city is not the business. Please work with the carriage companies or CTA. They are not the enemy. Tourism is here to stay. We all need to work together to create a balance for residents, business, and guests. I thank you for serving on the Tourism Commission, and if I can answer any questions or be of any assistance, please contact me.
Thank you. Next on for those that had signed up to speak is we have Tyler Jones from CARES. And Tyler, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Members of the commission, my name is Tyler Jones with Charleston CARES. We are made up of Old South Carriage Company, Palmetto Carriage Works, and Charleston Carriage Works. As you have been made aware, the local anti-carriage political group, Charleston Carriage Horse Advocates, proposed an ordinance last year to put new and arbitrary regulations on carriage tours. So here we are again, desperately trying to satisfy a group of people who are impossible to satisfy. Unless banning all carriage tours is in any of these ordinances, they're never going to be satisfied and they're never going away. And this Tourism Commission is well acquainted with the demands of these residents. And for the last year, city staff has bent over backwards to make sense of nonsensical demands, such as requiring carriage drivers to pass mental examinations. It is impossible to compromise with the uncompromising. To fashion a fair ordinance requires the participation of people who want a solution more than they want to keep the issue before council and before the commission until they get their way. But for years now, the carriage companies have endured harassment and relentless attacks from this political group. They have screamed at our customers, who, remember, are people visiting Charleston. They've screamed at our employees, picketed and protested in front of our barns, intimidated our barn workers to the point that many of them have quit because of the verbal abuse. and they have spread misinformation and lies about how we do business. Y'all have seen it. And for the new commissioners, you will as well. But yet here we are again, giving them a year of city time, city resources, city tax dollars, and a year of our time. And I don't have to remind you all that this past year has been tough. It's been the most difficult year in our history as a carriage community and for small businesses everywhere. And COVID was devastating for our businesses. And we are just now getting back to something approaching normal. And just as we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, instead of focusing on growing our businesses and recouping our losses, we're here fighting again for our existence. All because of a very loud and very small minority of politically connected residents and their hotshot attorney from New York City who wrote an impractical ordinance that has been given a year of city time. And the ordinance itself, it's comedic how unrealistic and unserious it is. And the people who wrote it have no knowledge of carriage tours or horses or carriages. They don't know our operations because many of the things that they called for, we already do. And the rest of what they called for is either unnecessary or arbitrary, intended to put us out of business and have nothing to do with safety whatsoever. So our group, Charleston Cares, we sat down to review the anti-carriage groups ordinance about a year ago. We went through it line by line, and we truly thought it was a joke, that we had the wrong document, because surely no one could take this seriously. And the city has spent a year trying to turn the unworkable into something halfway workable. And at the end of that year, the city narrowed the ordinance significantly to a much more realistic, but still imperfect document that's before you tonight. And even though we think this whole exercise is futile and rewards bad behavior, we are willing to compromise in order to continue our objective of being the safest and best run carriage community in the country. And the men and women who care for our horses and conduct tours take pride in being the gold standard for carriage tours in the entire country. And we are here ready to assist the city with our expertise in crafting an ordinance that makes sense for everyone. But the ordinance written by the anti-carriage ordinance is not full of good ideas, because that's not their goal. Their goal is to hurt us and monopolize your time, this commission's time. And trust me, I know what it's like. I was deposed by this group's attorney, Mr. Green, for the better part of 6 hours a couple years ago, just fishing for something that they could take out of context to make carriage tours look bad. And after 6 hours, they gave up and instead resorted to this. So finally, members of the commission, we are tired of this game. We are tired of trying to operate our businesses while having to fight these battles with this same group every few months in front of this commission. We can give them everything they're asking for, and they're still going to be back in a few months demanding something else. And at some point, I believe and that point is now, we have to say enough is enough. And I can assure you, you all have better things to do on this commission than to deal with the same issue repeatedly. So I ask you to send a message today: reject this. Don't let them hold this commission hostage any longer, and don't let them monopolize city resources like they have done for far too long. While we don't agree with everything the city came up with in their proposal, we are willing to compromise. And we submitted some very small clarification edits that we ask you all to review and give us the opportunity to explain. So I'm here to answer any and all questions, and I really thank you for your time and your service to our city.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Next is Nicholas Green, wish to speak. One moment. Mr. Green, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Lee, is it possible to make it so I can share my screen?
I don't believe we have that ability. Let me see. No, sir, I don't believe we have that ability.
You can't elevate me to a panelist for that?
Yes, sir, I would have to do that.
Is that possible?
Mr. Doman, is that okay to do? You're on mute, sir.
if it's easy to do, sure, go ahead and do it. If it's not easy to do, we're not really legally required.
I just have a brief slide deck to accompany my statement, and
Yeah.
I think it'd be useful and educational for the panel.
Sure, I just did it.
We were able to see your screen if you're ready.
You can't see the opening slide.
We can see it. If you're ready to proceed, we're ready for you.
I am. Thank you. So I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight and for your consideration of this ordinance. I won't engage with everything that was said by the prior speaker, but I'm not sure that I'm a hotshot attorney. Definitely am not from New York City. And as a resident of Charleston with family here, I appreciate the opportunity to engage on this important issue as counsel for the Charleston Carriage Horse Advocates. So about a year ago, just to kind of set the table for you on what's before you, we did approach the city with some suggestions for reforming the ordinance to bring it in line with best practices in the carriage industries and other municipalities, as well as analogous parts of our carriage industry and carriage industries in other cities, or I mean, tourism industry in our city and in other cities. And that led to a process of discussion. It came up at City Council. City Council did ask the Department of Livability to take a look at the ordinance and engage with us. That led to a number of conversations with Mr. Riccio and Ms. Shear, both of whom worked highly collaboratively with us, and I appreciate them taking the time out of their busy schedules in order to participate in this discussion with us. And so along those lines, I do have just a thank you to the department and to City Council for taking the time on this. And the ordinance that they've proposed, make no mistake about it, is a really good starting place. It does some really key things on the issue before this particular committee, which is sections 1 through 3, namely introducing a licensing requirement for carriage drivers, minimum requirements for what it takes to obtain that license, including a limited background check for sexual assault, violence against persons and property, and animal welfare offenses, as well as a training program. Now, we may not agree with the nature of the training program that's in here, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. The fact that it does have those minimum standards is incredibly important, and I think solidifies the importance of having minimum standards in place and a licensing regime in place so that the Department of Livability, the police department, as well as the city can exercise regulatory oversight over individual drivers. And so make no mistake about it, that is an incredibly important and notable step that we are strongly supportive of and appreciate the proposal being offered by Mr. Riccio in that regard. That said, as to the sections 1 through 3, there are 3 things that we believe a minimum safety ordinance should have with respect to the carriage drivers and the industry in Charleston. This is, of course, not exhaustive. There are some issues with respect to other parts of the proposed ordinance that will be put before other committees and the Tourism Commission as a whole. But as to drivers, there's three things that I'd like to take a minute to outline. The first is a drug screening program. This is not an intrusive testing program that we've requested, but rather an effort to bring the carriage industry in line with federal and state law requirements for motorized vehicles engaged in similar activities. And as I'll demonstrate in a minute, drug screening programs are a common and frankly, bare minimum risk mitigation strategy when you're in this sort of industry. It is somewhat unbelievable to me as a risk and compliance attorney that the industry hasn't adopted this on their own. Nonetheless, here we are. The second is a requirement for 2 drivers. I get that that's a financial impediment for them. That is not the goal. The goal here is to minimize distracted driving and recognizing the burdens that are on a single carriage driver, and more importantly, the safety that they are entrusted with respect to their paying customers and to the residents and the visitors of the city of Charleston. And the final one is a slight rejiggering of the training standards to eliminate the express reference to KONA, which is a trade association for the carriage industry. On drug screening, what we've proposed is not novel. In fact, if you are driving a commercial bus with 16 or more people, including the driver, so you can have 15 passengers and 16 with the driver, you need a commercial driver's license. And as part of that, there is a drug testing program pre-employment, random screening throughout, and post-accident. That is, to my knowledge, not being done by any member of the Charleston carriage industry, despite the fact that the tours do have 16, are capable of having 16 or more people. And so what we would propose is simply to adopt what's already in federal or state law if the carriages had motors in them effectively, right? We're not talking about anything that would require a drug test before every shift or anything like that. It's simply, a 5-drug screening panel before you take your employment, having a program in place for random screening and reasonable suspicion throughout. And if you're involved in an accident, having a drug panel as a matter of course. This is not uncommon. In fact, others in the Charleston tourism industry are already subject to these drug screening programs. It's not an impediment for their business. And even if it's not the law for them, they do it because it is common sense. Why wouldn't you do this if you are carrying that many people in this situation? And so I went online today and just looked at some job postings in the Charleston tourism industry. This is for captains, mates, deckhands, and bartenders on Charleston Harbor tours, right? To be a bartender, you need to be able to pass a drug test, okay? Not a problem for the harbor tours. This is a posting for the Brew Tour bus driver. I believe this is one of those kind of mini bus operations. Posting for a CDL driver. By definition, if you have a CDL, you are subject to random drug and alcohol screening, okay? Not obviously an impediment for that listing. Here's a shuttle driver for the Hilton Garden Inn, right? Must be able to pass a pre-hire drug screen. Random drug screens conducted throughout employment, okay? This is Gray Line of Tennessee. So Nashville, obviously a city we compete with directly for tourism dollars, right? This is one of those kind of smaller type buses. Requirements, CDL, Class A or B with passenger endorsement preferred, clean motor vehicle record, must pass background check and drug test. Now, look, I get it. Those postings are not for carriage drivers. But I think that we can all recognize that and here's my argument. When you are behind the wheel of a bus, it's a lot safer than being behind the wheel or behind the animal on a carriage, okay? Those buses have passenger restraints, they have brakes, they have many lights, and they are not being pulled by a prey animal that is prone to spooking in an urban environment, okay? And so why wouldn't we, just as a minimum standard, like bare minimum that we could do, is to require that they do the same thing that they would have to do if the carriage were being pulled by a motor instead of a prey animal. And you all can feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. You're not going to throw me off or anything like that.
No, but just one second, Dan. how long is this going to take? Because I want to kind of on the essence of time and fairness. Did not realize that this would be a presentation. How long will this take? Because we do have to proceed pretty, in accordance with our agenda.
Well, Dan, as we discussed, I think it's okay for us to outline our position here. I mean, I've only been on for less than 10 minutes, and I'm more than halfway through my presentation.
But you have to realize this is citizen participation for anybody that has the ability to give their opinion and things of that nature. This cannot take up the whole agenda time.
Well, with respect, Dan, with respect, I mean, first of all, the agenda isn't very cumbersome. And, I think that this is, central to the issues that you all will discuss, and that's going to be put forward to the commission for a recommendation to city council.
Let me jump in here and say this. I would say public participation normally is limited in time. Often in our tourism commission meetings, it's just 2 or 3 minutes. Obviously, this is a subcommittee. We can spend a little bit more time on the details, but the chairman does have the right to be able to say he's going to restrict the amount of time of each speaker. I think you've spoken more than all the other speakers. It would be reasonable if the chairman believes it's appropriate to say, can you wrap it up in the next 5 minutes?
And I would ask the chairman for 5 minutes of time.
And I would like to say that I had no warning about this being presented in the manner. I don't have a problem with that, but there is a time limit. I don't want it to appear that we have collaborated this effort to do a presentation when I had no idea you were going to do a presentation. I just want that on the record.
Yeah, and Dan, I would like on the record that I have made it known to you all, and there was no objection raised to being able to present a short presentation.
Mr. Green, this is the chair. We'll give you 5 minutes starting at this point. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. The second is a requirement for 2 drivers. And in the interest of time, I will move quickly. Look, the city council has already determined that distracted driving is a threat to public safety. Okay, this is the ordinance and the finding with respect to handheld mobile devices. None of us on this, and sorry, my thing is acted up. None of us can drive our personal vehicles with airbags and one person in the car while looking at a mobile phone in the city of Charleston. At least we shouldn't be allowed to. Whether it's enforced or not is a separate issue. Look, when we look at just kind of the basic job responsibilities of a carriage driver, the distractions are obvious and inherent. We're asking them to do at least 7 different visual, manual, and cognitive tasks: handling animals, driving the carriage, managing the safety of 16 plus passengers, some of which include the majority of children when we're talking about school groups, navigating busy, narrow, and congested city streets, giving an entertaining tour to paying customers, notifying equine cleanup, and avoiding pedestrians and other vehicles. As we all know, especially in the tourism areas, folks aren't necessarily paying attention to what they're doing when they're walking, right? And so we're asking carriage drivers to do a lot. They do I'm not sure I could do it. I appreciate the difficulty of the task, but that's not really the standard. The standard is what's the bare minimum required for the safety of residents and visitors. And look, anybody who's been around the carriages and been in downtown Charleston knows what it's like when they're giving a tour, right? They're not necessarily paying attention to the road or the animals. This is the intersection of Queen and Logan, right there between Charleston Day, Queen Street Grocery, Meminger, not far away in the narrow streets in Harleston Village, going right through a stop sign, only intermittently looking at the intersection, looking at the different buildings, and then kneeling down for whatever reason, right? And these are just illustrative examples. I mean, we could go on and on and on. This one is a driver going through the intersection at Cumberland and Logan, again, not stopping, looking only at one part of the intersection, waving down Cumberland Street while giving an entertaining tour. And I'm just going to back up for just a minute because this one's a little personal for me. That building behind there is the annex for St. Philip's Preschool, where my 4-year-old and 2-year-old go to preschool. We go through this intersection all the time, right? It is not too much to ask that people pay attention to the road while they are driving any vehicle, much less one with an animal that we all acknowledge can have control issues. And so our request on this is, and look, we also know from past incidents that when emergencies happen, drivers are just as likely to be thrown and injured as anybody else. They are run over by their own carriage or thrown and concussed or hurt on their head. And there's nobody there to handle the imminent emergency of a runaway animal or tend to passengers. And so for that reason, we would ask that the city require that there be 2 employees on each carriage tour in order to deal with emergencies. Finally, we would argue that the city should not adopt the KONA training standard as the bare minimum standard. If they want to adhere to that and do more, that's fine. But by definition, KONA is a trade association which makes clear on their own website that the driver's training manual is a step-by-step manual to help you run a more profitable business, not necessarily a safe one. And so we have language that I think does a better job without ceding city authority to a trade organization for the carriage industry. So those are my 3 points on carriage drivers. Welcome your questions and appreciate your indulgence in your time on my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to add that my perception of his presentation was this was spoken about prior. It was not. I had maybe 3 telephone conversations with him as I did with the industry. Our specific goal was to try and collaborate together as opposing groups in the city to come up with best practices. That's what we're doing now. But my last conversation with him was that we would allow him the opportunity to present his plan to the committee as we are doing now. I just want that on the record, just to let everyone know that my position here when dealing with this whole process for the past year.
Okay, thank you. Duly noted. And Lee, what do we have next on the agenda?
Next on the agenda is moving to items of discussion. And just to kind of start things off, I was going to read a portion of the letter that was sent to all the commission members from Dan. The Charleston Carriage Horse Advocates, through their representative, Attorney Nicholas Green, submitted a proposed ordinance to the city on or about August 2020. The city's typical protocol when ordinances and amendments are requested is for city staff, including legal staff, to write the ordinances. Our staff carefully reviewed the proposal and worked over many months with the city legal department to draft a preliminary ordinance in response. The city drafted a proposal that we believe to be effective, enforceable, and legally proper. This version was shared with the carriage industry and the Charleston Carriage Horse Advocates representatives. And the representatives of the carriage industry generally agreed, but responded with some recommendations. The CCHA attorney, Nicholas Green, after a review of the city ordinance, asked that their original proposal to go before the Tourism Commission as written, along with our proposal. The Tourism Commission and its subcommittees are asked to review the City of Charleston preliminary amendments, which is Exhibit 1, the Charleston Carriage Horse Advocates proposal, Exhibit 2, and the response from representatives of the carriage industry, which is Exhibit 3. The Tour Guide Subcommittee will deal with portions relating to the proposed animal drawn carriage license, which is covered in sections 1 through 3 of the preliminary ordinance. Each committee will report to the entire commission at the meeting on June 23rd if the commission passes a recommendation. It will be sent to City Council for their review and decision as to whether or not to pass it, what is recommended, to reject it, or to modify it. Thank you. So next would be starting with in Exhibit 1 is starting with the first section, Section 1, and Mallory and Mr. Doman, Tim, if you, I think I'll hand it over to y'all.
Thank you, Lee. Tim, do you want me to go through? I'll just go through the ordinance real quick.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Well, one, I'd like to just say thank you very much to our livability staff. They really did take a lot of time. We're very thoughtful. Shannon, our equine manager, was very engaged. So I really do appreciate the time and energy they put into that. I also very much appreciate the time and energy that both Mr. Green and Mr. Jones did as well. So this is obviously not necessarily an easy decision for y'all, but I think that our staff did an excellent job in trying to give y'all a very fair ordinance for y'all to consider the recommendations to. If you have hopefully y'all have it pulled up in front of y'all. If y'all would like me to do a screen share, let me know, and I'm happy to do that if that makes life easier. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go through the three key sections. The first section is pretty easy. It's just letting you know that we're going to be making changes. But the second section is where we get into more of the substance. So what we're proposing to change, actually, I'm going to do a screen share. I think that'll make life easier. So hang on one second. All right, can y'all see that?
Yes.
All right. Now I can't because now it's tiny. There we go. All right, so when we get to section 2 and we look at the requirements, right now we're trying to add an age requirement of 18 years. I think that's fair and reasonable just to have an age standard, making sure somebody does have, you know, a South Carolina driver's license, and that they are required to obtain a city issued animal drawn carriage driver's license, so that they will have this license or permit to be able to operate a carriage vehicle in our city. The previous language has been struck because that's defined more in terms of what is going to be included in the license. So when we go into what is required in these standards, we get to the section 3. So this is requiring that, you know, the permit be obtained by any carriage driver in the city. With the exception is if somebody is in training. So obviously in that circumstance, there would be 2 drivers as somebody would be in the process of being trained to operate a carriage tour in the city. The application for the carriage driver's permit. As we go through this, the application would include obviously the individual's name as it includes on their birth certificate, or if they have a legal court order, which has changed their name, their address, and their employer. So essentially which carriage company they're going to work for. You did hear them discuss CONA, which is the Carriage Organization of North America. They do have a very thorough guide in terms of basic standards for carriage driving. They are the trade industry, but they do have the technical expertise to provide some very solid basic standards for consideration. So we will be asking in this new permit requirement that there be a certificate of completion that somebody can do these basic standards. The next part, sorry, it keeps switching to the next one. When somebody submits their application, it's important that this application be properly reviewed. We'll do it with the police chief in conjunction with, you know, our Department of Livability, and we're going to do our best to have a very timely turnover. We understand that, you know, the time is important. So our goal is to within 7 days, this determination would be made. Factors that are going to be considered with this application is whether or not this individual has had their permit suspended or revoked within the last 5 years, that they have not had any material omission, nothing's untrue, we haven't been misled, We had originally proposed that the applicant not have been convicted of a felony or misdemeanor involving a sex offense, animal abuse, or any violent acts against person or property. We shared our draft back in February. Upon further discussion, it might be something that this committee would consider striking misdemeanor and having everything more focused as felony, just to kind of, as it is currently pretty narrowly tailored right now. So this would kind of widen it up a little bit and focus only on the more serious nature offenses if you did decide to strike misdemeanor. And the other thing that we would be reviewing is whether or not anybody had any outstanding warrants. So if any of this came back, you know, with a concern, then the applicant would be, the permit would be denied. Upon approval, you know, if they, once they're investigated and they're approved, then we would, the police department with the Department of Livability would begin the process of executing a permit. This permit would be good for 10 years. We're not asking people to come back and do this on an annual basis. We're saying it's a 10-year permit, kind of similar to like a driver's license. We are allowed, we will require, we will charge some basic fees. We are only allowed to charge fees based off of the cost of processing. So this would be very minimally tailored to cover the cost of the application and the background checks. We give everybody the chance to renew their permit. There's a process for that that is clearly outlined in this ordinance. We do require the carriage driver to carry the permit with them, just like you have to have your driver's license when you're driving your car. There are certain circumstances where we could revoke or suspend the carriage permit. If we find out, you know, if there's any cause, such as if there's been fraud, misrepresentation, or a false statement made on the application that we become aware of, we can have intervention. If there's any other violation of this article, if they since the permit, they receive a conviction for a felony, or as it's written right now, with a misdemeanor of a sex offense, animal abuse, or violent act, or if they do have some sort of civil judgment or criminal conviction also tied to fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation, then they could have their carriage permit revoked. So also it would be any other breach of peace. If there had been any other issues, we do reserve those rights as well. Because we are adding the permit process, it is imperative that I do let all of you know there is an appeals process. So if somebody does become aggrieved, they do have the right to appeal our revocation or suspension of their license. That process, as you probably already read, is very clearly outlined. They have 30 days to submit their appeal. Then they are entitled to a hearing on appeal, which we will file within 30 days of receiving their appeal. They are, you know, entitled to, or they are allowed and warranted, you know, an attorney to represent them as long as they notify us within 15 days of their hearing. But all of the actions in terms of their due process, in terms of having their permit revoked, are outlined as well in this ordinance. So that's kind of a very quick overview of the three sections that y'all are considering. I'm happy to answer any questions, as well as I'm sure anyone on livability who also worked on this. I can scroll back up, I will stop the screen share, get us all back together.
There is nothing in there about pre-employment drug screening, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And Mallory can elaborate. The balance that we had to come up with is what is normal for other entities, in this case, tour entities. When we issue a bus permit to a coach bus, we don't go to their company and make sure that their driver has been tested for drugs. That's their issue to deal with, not the city's. And that is the reason why, as a group, that we decided that we may be overstepping our bounds if we go to the drug testing. Am I correct, Mallory? And we need to stick what guidelines that we can do, like a background check. So the balance we tried to achieve here was, if we weren't going to go to a entity like a CDL driver and their company, for their bus company, to make sure that they have drug testing, we have to be consistent and fair across the board. So we maintain that fabric of fairness all across the board. So that's what we took in consideration when it came down to the drug testing. You know, there's responsibility on a private industry that they need to take care of. And if we overstep our bounds, then there is an issue. And I believe that's why we chose that, correct, Mal?
So, yeah, so essentially, very, very much what Dan said is we needed to focus on, you know, for the city of Charleston employees, we're required a drug test. This is our employer. We are not employing the carriage companies. We are trying to make sure that they are operating safely on our roadways. And the ordinance, as Dan said, or Mr. Riccio said, is I think a harmonious balance between making sure that they do meet these minimum thresholds. Some of the carriage companies may have that in place, and they may soon after this meeting. But I don't think that that's something that needs to be codified in this ordinance, respectfully.
This is Chad Young. So in fairness to me, it doesn't seem like if you're a walking tour guide, suddenly you don't have to be screened as a sex offender, any type of misdemeanor for fraud, that kind of thing. And it's a singling out the carriage operators specifically. So, I can mildly get on board with, okay, you're driving a carriage, you need to take some type of test to make sure you can control the carriage, but everything else seemed overreaching to me.
Now, right?
Mr. Brown?
Yeah. Okay, like Mr. Riccio said, I drive a 25 passenger bus. I cannot get my license unless I have the DOT handles all of the drug tests, all the things for us, not the city, the DOT. I can't get a driver's license, a regular driver's license, without having the yearly medical test exam and the drug test exam. And then I have to have that because I drive a 25 passenger bus. I would need none of that if I'm driving carriage hold, 15 people? I think
16.
16. If I had a 16 passenger bus, I would need to have a drug test or 14 passenger or CDL. So it really, I don't think it's necessary for them to really have all those things, because those things are required by the state, the Department of Transportation.
Mr. Chairman, this is Michael Sabo. I thought it would be a good idea, Dan, to have you kind of give some background on the third part, the Charleston Cares. When you provided the ordinance that the city had written, and you provided it to the industry on the core side, and they made some adjustments to some of the wording. Can you just tell me a little bit more about how that conversation went?
Yeah, briefly, I made contact by telephone to both sides. And lastly, with these recommendations from the CARES group or the carriage industry, basically I advised them that, we need to, if you have some opinions or thoughts, you need to chime in and give us your insight on what you think is fair. And that's our whole premise here. But Mallory, can you expound on that? Or
one of the things that they had marked, especially in terms of the employment, or under the employment, hang on, let me get that back up, was one of the things that I had, it would be page 4. Well, page 4 is part of it, but eliminating the misdemeanors. So page 3, number 3, subsection C, we factored in some of their edits. We did think that changing, or at least dropping misdemeanor and focusing on felony did help kind of broaden, make it less narrow focus. So we did take in their statements in consideration.
And if I can chime in for Mr. Yance, I agree. I think across the board, eventually, especially with moving vehicles, whether little certified buses and carriage drawn vehicles, I think there is the onus on the city to at least make sure that there is some training and some permitting process in place. And that's the reason why we agreed and went forward with that proposal, because we thought it was a good idea. Now, the permitting process for the city is already in place, to be honest with you. And that's what we discussed in our meetings. If you're a peddler or a solicitor and you want to peddle in the city of Charleston, you have to go through a background check to receive a peddler's permit. No different from anybody else. So we thought that was practical, and we seem agreeable as a group that it's probably practical across the board eventually. The city has a duty and obligation to address issues and concerns, and that's what our goal is, and that's what we're doing. So I agree. I think it should be across the board of all tourism industry that are providing tours to make sure that tourists are safe and residents are safe.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other discussion? Lee, are we?
I do think the misdemeanor is appropriate to remove, as Mallory said. I think that's a very reasonable option.
Okay, thank you. Lee, I think you're on mute.
It looked like Ms. Broadus was trying to say something, but I was just saying she's on mute as well.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now, I believe. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I've been listening. I'm pretty new to this, but I have been on a carriage. I live in a horse community, and I do know that there are some important things that need to be done. And the city, I believe Lee Ann said the city is not a business, but the city is in business to protect the people and the horses and those that come and visit. I think that's the primary reason that we need to strengthen some of the rules. And it seems like everyone's resisting that. And I'm not sure I understand where the pushback comes from. It appears to me that there is a backstory I'm not familiar with, but I do have some questions. So why don't I just get to it? How long do the carriage drivers work with these horses before they're out on tour? Because as I know horses, they become familiar with people. And if you have one person that's giving, this one person that's giving a tour and a history of Charleston and has the reins, and he has to control the horse and also the traffic, it just seems like it's too much. Now, I guess the problem with that is you have to hire another person, and everyone's concerned about that. So I'm not sure I understand where we are we take out misdemeanors and we keep in felonies. And if we find out if they resist, you're going to be able to give them a hearing. And it's just too much going on. It's not enough consistency between the three groups. I know it's difficult with the Zoom, but I think everyone needs to get together and start to comb out through all of the variants of all of these rules, because they're all kind of the same and everyone's trying to help, but it's not helping because there seems to be a little bit of a hostility, and the problems don't seem to really go away. They just kind of get pushed to the background. I guess I don't want to ramble, so I'm going to leave it at that, but I am confused about all the rules that don't seem to really get to the crux of protecting the people who come here. The end.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments from the panelists?
Now, the thing of the driver's license and the drug testing, those things are state mandated. We don't have anything to do with those items, as Mr. Riccio mentioned. And I think if we were to get into that, we would be overstepping our bounds, and because those are things that are mandated by the state. My Department of Transportation, my number, my side of my bus is all state programs, and the state has nothing to do with those. I can't drive if I get caught driving without a CDL, the state will punish me. If I'm driving the city without a CDL, the city wouldn't know nothing about it.
I think the change is that the carriages are not regulated by the South Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles. Is that the difference?
The difference is, Chairman, and to explain Mr. Brown's question, yes, your bus is certified or mandated by state law. Carriage operations do have city purview because they have a franchise agreement to work on city streets. So we do have an obligation at some point to ensure that a driver of a carriage does have the training and capability of operating that vehicle. It is a vehicle, just like state law requires. It's a vehicle that you have to have a driver's license to operate, because you have to adhere to all state and local traffic laws on the record. So just to differentiate between your bus and a carriage, there's a franchise agreement that we have more insight and more purview over their operations on our streets to ensure that the public is safe when they're operating that vehicle on the street. So yes, we do have that responsibility, in my opinion, to make sure that the person operating that vehicle is competent. So I do agree with that as a part of this ordinance, that it doesn't exist right now. And I think it is important because we do have accidents that may be preventable if there is a training program in place that is required by the city, that not the city do the test, but make sure that the company is training their people effectively and making sure that they're competent to handle that vehicle. And that's the crux of all of this permitting before you today. And Ms. Broadus, that is why, and I know it's the climate is heavy here and hot with these entities, we get it, but there should be some oversight from the city, in our view, to make sure that an individual is competent to operate on the city streets, because we do have an obligation for public safety for our citizens and the tourists.
So am I understanding that we want two people to conduct the tours, one to drive and one to do the history? Is that what you want?
No, ma'am.
Oh.
Valerie. Can you
No, that we did not include in this proposed, in our proposed ordinance.
And
we felt it was practical for one driver on this size vehicle versus two.
And there are two other subcommittees looking at other issues to address the whole holistic approach to the carriage horses. So right now we are just focused on these three very narrow criteria.
Just what's before you. And Ms. Braddis, you will have the opportunity as a full commission at the end of the day when all these issues come before full commission for your insight on other portions of the ordinance. But your goal right here is to focus on what your subcommittee is focusing on and having to vote on.
And that is just the licensing. I see.
Now,
Sections 1, 2, and 3 are what we're looking at today.
Now, when Mr. Green mentioned about the pedestrian not paying attention, that's an unprecedented study. That's a study that that's one thing that need to be studied by a professional group. I don't think we can go into something that pedestrians are not paying attention unless it's done by a bona fide group who can study that type of thing. So I don't think we need to take that into consideration until someone has, of a professional nature, has studied it, whether they are paying attention, whether they're not paying attention. We can't rely on someone sitting on a porch and determining whether pedestrians are paying attention or not. So I think we need to take that out. Not,
And just a question for me. Again, this is Chad Yount. So this ordinance, I guess, was started by Mr. Green's group. Is that right? And then presented to you, and then that's where everything started from.
Yes, sir. It started from there. And that's when I explained to council last year that, normal protocol is the introduction letter that was presented to you guys. It states that there is city protocol. Anybody can suggest, a resolution to some problem they're having to form an ordinance, but the city, the burden's on them to basically come up with the rules and regulations and vet that with staff and legal staff. So that's what we did. We did receive it. If we, again, we have a duty and obligation. If we receive concerns, we have to address it. So that's what we did as a group. We addressed their concerns, but we did it in a manner that we felt that was legal and practical to enforce. And it's your decision as a group to decide whether throw it out, change it, approve it, whatever. But that's our side of the mission, and that's what we're presenting to this subcommittee.
Chad, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the three proposals as presented by Ms. Scheer with removal of the word misdemeanor, which I believe was in section 2, if I recall specifically.
It was section 3, subsection C, and then it
wherever it is, right. You can fix the number. But the word, just strike the word, but adopt the proposals as read by you. Elimination of the word misdemeanor wherever it sits.
Thank you. And just for clarity, so I know we were by email, we received 3 different attachments, one being the 3 different groups. I think what Dr. Weinstein's referring to is the one that the city revised with input from the carriage group. Is that right?
Correct.
It would be the first one that's preliminary.
Okay, thank you.
It'll have preliminaries, okay.
So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Now we call on Tim Doman.
Well, if somebody doesn't second the motion, then this motion would fail for lack of a second and we wouldn't be able to vote. But if there's some additional discussion that the group wants to have, that's fine too. Is there anybody who wants to second Dr. Weinstein's motion?
I'm wondering about that, the misdemeanor, but that Dr. Weinstein mentioned. I can't remember how you used that word a while ago.
Well, so he proposed, and the city actually thought it was a good idea to take out the word "or misdemeanor," because that would prohibit somebody, if they had a conviction for vandalism, that would be a misdemeanor against property, and that might be too restrictive. But if it's a felony, all felonies are big crimes. I mean, obviously, they by definition involve a potential of punishment for 1 year or more in jail. So there are no insignificant felonies, in my opinion. So by doing that, it allows somebody who might have had a conviction for vandalism or some other smaller crime to still be a carriage operator.
And Tim, wouldn't somebody, maybe when they were a little younger, marijuana or something, wouldn't that be a misdemeanor?
Well, that is a misdemeanor. You're right. That is a misdemeanor. Possession of marijuana would be a misdemeanor. Now, I do think that the city already is saying that it would have to involve animal abuse, sexual assault, or something that would involve violence towards people or property. So I don't think under either version, simple possession of marijuana is going to kick somebody out of being a carriage tour driver. But I would say that vandalism or, getting caught with graffiti, doing graffiti would be charged as perhaps vandalism as a misdemeanor. Maybe we want to let somebody who did that as a youth still be a carriage operator. So right. I kind of agree with the city's suggestion and your motion that that's probably good to knock out the or misdemeanor language. That will allow more people to be carriage operators.
Would we also be voting for the drug testing?
No, that's not in the proposal. So you're being asked the motion that was made is to adopt what the city has put forward, with the exception of striking or misdemeanor, which has the obvious effect of what I just discussed. And that is the motion that's on the table. And I think that we were looking to see if there was anyone willing to second that motion.
Just for discussion, is it appropriate to have discussion at this point? Okay.
Yeah.
It's summertime. I have young children. We're going to travel to another city. I certainly, hope it's safe. I take my responsibility on the board seriously. I do want to keep in mind, we've had a very difficult business environment with the pandemic the last year and tough with tourism. We're just coming back. And so I'm inclined not to move forward with the ordinance at this time. It just doesn't seem warranted. That's my personal feeling.
And I think that this group should either make a recommendation for approval of something. You can make a recommendation that something not go forward. We're going to have to bring this whole thing to the Tourism Commission. I don't think we're going to be able to stop any one part of the ordinance from going to the Tourism Commission. So the other news is, I think no matter what our vote is, this committee will either report out favorable recommendation, unfavorable, or perhaps nothing. You might not report out anything, but I think it is going to go to the Tourism Commission in full regardless. And then there will be an opportunity to consider all of these different ideas that are being hashed out over the next 3 meetings here at that one Tourism Commission meeting, in which each one of you will receive a vote.
I've almost every meeting that I've attended, I don't think there's ever been a meeting where the opponents of the carriage industry didn't have some sort of complaint or something about the industry. And I'm just wondering what they're saying. I need to read it again to see exactly what they're saying that they have already said before, or what the carriage company are not already doing. I know for a fact, I know about the training that the carriage companies do. I've been on the carriages, I've visited those barns and everything, and I see I see what they're doing, and just there's nothing new. I don't hear anything new that they want, except that they're trying to put the carriage industry out of business. And, you know, I see the bad signs all over the place, the negative signs all over the place that I really don't like. I never like. And I just think there's, they need to come up with something better than what they're doing. That the companies are already doing everything that they're proposing. They're not gonna hire anybody who will have drug addicts in the industry, carriage industry. So I'm just confused about what they want, you know, and what has been being done.
Certainly, Alfonso, the double driver does have a financial impact. I mean, it doubles their cost of employees for each trip, and we don't have two drivers on a Greyhound bus. I don't understand that one. I'm vehemently opposed to having two drivers on the carriage. So that's one that's I hadn't seen before until they presented it.
So they're fishing for problems.
In fairness to the motion on the floor, I'll call for a second. In absence of that, we'll table that.
That's fine.
Is there a second? No. Okay. Any other?
So what you might want to consider doing is, I suppose somebody might want to make a motion either to report this out to the full committee with disapproval of it, maybe with commentary that, you know, you just don't feel it's necessary. Or I suppose you could say, we just want to report out that we had a meeting and that we had various comments that were raised and that it's going to have to go before the full Tourism Commission. I would ask for one of you guys to think about wording a motion in one of those ways that might allow us to move forward, unless you want more information, because now is the time that we're able to talk about things.
You know what I would like to see? I would like to see the carriage industry on one end of the table, and what do you call the group? Who are they opposing carriaging? The
Charleston Carriage Horse Advocates.
The what?
Charleston Carriage Horse Advocates.
Yeah, the advocates on one side of the table, and the carriage industry on one side of the table. Let them discuss it, and we're there with them to hear what's going on. They can defend what they're saying, and then they can defend themselves, and we can actually see what they're doing. Because right now we don't have anyone from the carriage industry here on the Zoom, and we don't have anyone from the advocates on the Zoom. So we really don't. The lawyer's gone, and the guy who represents the carriage industry, they gone. So we really don't know what they're talking about. You know, what they're fussing all about. Every meeting we have, the industry, the carriage industry, the advocates are there, complaining, fishing, wonderful information, and maybe I would like to see the two groups together at the table. Then we can decide as the commission to make a decision, I think.
I can say this just from a legal standpoint. We cannot force anybody to come to the table and talk about these things. Sometimes this commission is the place where we are able to have a table, a metaphorical table, where you are the center of the table, and sometimes these advocates of different types in the public have different positions that they put out on the table, and others try to knock them down, and you decide as a group what stays on the table and what doesn't stay on the table. We have sometimes had some meetings between carriage advocates and horse advocates in the past. That takes a lot of work, and that winds up that usually there's not a whole lot of overlap in their positions, but sometimes there is. There has been in the past limited agreement on certain points, but I can't force everybody to come to the table other than this table, which is, again, metaphorical. And you have ideas that are placed on this table, and in this virtual metaphorical table, you are the deciders.
As it is now, everyone's throwing the rock and hiding. We don't see who's throwing. I don't know who these advocates are.
They don't have to tell you necessarily who they are, but again, my advice is always you are selected for your wisdom and experience, and you decide, again, what stays on this metaphorical table. Right now, I, again, would suggest that probably you're in a position where somebody would say, we are not going to make a positive or negative recommendation, just report it out to the full committee, or that we are making a recommendation with disapproval on the items 1, 2, and 3. I mean, any of that's within your power to do.
Well, I'll make a motion that we recommend disapproval of the items 1, 2, and 3 of the ordinance to the full Tourism Commission.
Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Brown is second. Mr. Chair, you want to have any discussion on that or call for it?
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I think we might need a little hand raising there because I'm certain I got who everybody voted for.
Okay, I'm count 3 ayes.
3 ayes on that motion.
And the nays? Okay.
I mean, 1 nay, 1 abstain.
Okay.
So that motion carried. Thank you. So this will be reported out to the full Tourism Commission. Do we know when that next meeting is going to be, Dan? When is that?
Lee, 23rd of June?
Yeah, 23rd.
That is correct. Yes, the 23rd of June.
And then we have 2 other subcommittees that are meeting over the next 2 days. And anybody who's listening out in the audience, of course, there may be restrictions on the amount of time that is available for speakers. For sure, if you want to get comments in, you can send them into the city and we will circulate them to the members of those subcommittees. That's the best way to make sure that your voice is heard, even if you have a limited amount of time to speak, because there is no guarantee to any member of the public or any group that you get a certain amount of time to speak.
I think it will be possible for us to meet in person.
At this point, City Council is not meeting in person at City Hall because logistics, IT, the smallness of it right now, unfortunately, this is what we have to deal with until we get it further along the road to be able to meet in person. There's been talk, suggestions about the Gill Yard and other places. It's a fee. There's money involved, so that's why it's decided that we just resume the Zoom. Sounded crazy. Resume the Zoom, and until we can meet in person.
But the visitor center is the option.
Well, if you can make it happen there, Mr. Brown, go ahead. Make it happen.
Lee, is there any, sorry.
Yeah, then you have to worry about the other caveats are public being able to attend, number of people. It gets complicated at this point. We're in a transition stage right now that we have to rely on both in-person and virtual. It's just the nature of the beast right now. So we have to go with the flow. And again, if you have questions, any members have questions, Mallory and Tim are always open one-on-one. Obviously, it's better than a quorum. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but you can always reach out to them and ask, for reasoning on a specific question.
I do have this is Yvonne Broadus again. I do have a question about how do I get more familiar with the carriage industry, going there and just observing, looking around. Mr. Brown has had loads of opportunities, been doing this for years, but I'm not that familiar with how they handle their personnel. How do I get more familiar with these discussions? Because I'm sitting almost on the fence here, not knowing.
I can make that happen for you.
That'd be great.
Fine manager, the only one in the country, by the way.
Okay.
That oversees the carriage industry.
All right.
She'd be willing to take you to the barns, show you around. We have to speak to the barns, but the company's always been open.
All right.
To visit. I don't think it'll be a problem, but I will extend our courtesy through Shannon Tillman to take you around.
All right.
Show you. And I don't believe you'll have any opposition from the carriage industry to allow you to do that.
Dan, I've just walked over there, went up and introduced myself, and they couldn't have been nicer and showed me around. And I walked around, smelled to see if it was dirty, those kind of things. But they were very kind. I just said who I was and that I was on the commission, and I would have shown them an ID if they asked, but they couldn't have been nicer.
Well, I don't have an ID, so maybe that's something I need to obtain.
Well, I just meant a driver's license. Just so they knew what my name was.
Oh, he made it sound very official.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Now, in addition to that, Ms. Broadus, and in addition to that, the Charleston Tour Association is having a meeting on the 14th. That's Monday, 14th of June, from 6 to 8. That is at 56 Buffane Street in the Festival Hall. 56 Buffane Street.
56 Buffane?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
The building is called the Festival Hall.
Yes.
Right next to Meminger.
Yes, yes.
And
everybody will be there. The carriage, to walking tour guide, the bus tour guide, the carriages and everything.
And that's June 14th.
You get to know them.
At what time? Did you know?
Between 6 to 8.
6 to 8? Okay.
The only thing I want you to be careful is that if you're allowed to talk to an individual to find out what's going on, and you're allowed to go visit a carriage barn or whatever. If you and Alfonso and Michael get together, all of a sudden y'all are like acting like a subcommittee. You're not allowed. You're actually technically violating FOIA. So I discourage you from going as a group.
As a group, okay.
Because that technically is a violation of FOIA. It seems like it would be a good idea because you'd hear everybody else's questions and stuff. But state law is afraid that you would be there in secret deciding things.
Okay, got it.
And Ms. Broadus, just so you know, it looks like Tyler Jones from CARES, to answer your question about the hours of training, the horse and driver get around 100 hours of training before they conduct a tour on the street. And he also said he'd be happy to give you a tour anytime.
Well, that'd be interesting because I'm trying to figure out what is all entails with these training. Is it volunteer training, or are you on the payroll training? I know that they had expenses. And so that's why they're pushing back on a lot of the things that we're asking. But I think it's essential that if you have an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, they need to have on the job training and also be part of what the horse is doing. And I'm not sure I know what that's all about. So it'll be good for me to take a tour and do all the things that I can do to be helpful the next time we meet in terms of opinions and voting.
Sprotus, I know this is Michael Sabo as the chair of the commission. I know they invited us when I was on the commission 2 or 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. We went individually and toured all of the carriage facilities, and I found it extremely eye-opening because you get a sense for how much they do care about what they're doing and the safety protocols that they have in place. So I would highly recommend it. And I know that from the previous times that I've been there, I was very much informed by just going in there and seeing things with my own eyes.
All right. I totally agree with that, and I will.
And okay. I want to make sure that, there are other people sounding in saying they would love to be able to talk to tourism commission members. And you have a right to talk to people. You could talk to the carriage advocates. You can talk to your neighbor. You can talk to anybody who you want. You're not required to talk to anybody. Unless they catch you in the grocery store in line, you don't have to say anything, it's up to you.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And Lee and Dan, do we have anything else that we should cover as the subcommittee?
No, sir. Next on the agenda, we have old business and new business. I'm not sure if we have any other old or new business to bring up.
I think we have enough new business to bring
up. I noticed on one of our meetings that we had mentioned about the tourists walking tour guides, walking all of the streets with the tourists, and I think we mentioned we were going to talk to them about that. And they all over the streets now, all over the streets.
Well, tourism's picking up, as you know.
Yes.
We are reaching out as we receive complaints. We are notifying entities of walking tours or whoever who seem to be over capacity and in the streets, but just, have patience. We address it as we receive it or as we see it. So we are taking a proactive stance with all that enforcement as well.
And well over 21.
No more old or new business.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I do want to thank all the committee members' time and also recognize staff's time for all the hard work that you've done so far. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Great seeing everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.